And so I went in and I looked at him. He was ice cold. Nothing about this made sense. I was completely back. It's almost like being in the water again. Your brain is completely like, this makes no sense. How could this be happening? So I went out in the hallway and I called out to who? Remember I said I had no God. I had nothing to even call out to. And I was like, why is this happening? What's happening? And all of a sudden, right in front of me was a bucket. And it was from the 1800s. It was tin slats, little slats all fit down into the bottom. And it was rusty. It was so old, this bucket. And I could look, the bucket was floating there just like anything, like you could touch it. And I could look into the bucket. And down at the bottom of the bucket was a little silvery blob, like an amoeba. And it was so tiny, like a little tiny blob. And all of a sudden I had this download that the bucket was Evan's vessel. It was his body. The bucket was housing the life force, which was almost dead. It was this little blob of silvery fluid. And all of a sudden I'm hearing, fill it up, fill it up, fill it up. And it's the same voice that, relax. And I'm like, oh, fill it up. Now I'm not telling it to go away this time because obviously it's helping me. So like, fill it up. I said, what do you want me to fill up? That's when I saw the bucket. So first I heard the fill it up, fill it up. Then I saw the bucket. And so I'm looking in the bucket and I'm like, what do you want me to fill it up with? And when I lifted my head up, the doctors and nurses and people walking around in the hallways all were glowing. Remember Evan said the light coming out of the chest was different colors? Well, I was seeing energy all around each individual person. And I was like, oh, that's that aura stuff, you see in a movie or something. So that was all I knew about aura, was what I'd seen in a movie. So I was like, oh, that's aura, that's energy. And I heard ding, 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 ding. I was like, great, Bob Barker. Okay, okay, what do I do? How do I get the energy out of the people and into the bucket? Because I knew they wanted me to put the energy from the people into the bucket. So anyway, all of a sudden, it just downloaded. See, the way Spirit speaks to us is so interesting because it can be a clear word, or it can be a clear sense, or it can be like, I call them YouTube videos. But this was a download. I needed to get the energy out of, so if you guys were here, I needed to get the energy out of your bodies and into his body. And how was I going to do that? And I had no idea. So these beings, at that time, I didn't even know I was talking to beings. I didn't know what they were. All I knew was that they explained that there's a portal in the tops, in both hands, and there's a portal in both feet. I often think this is why they put Jesus on the cross with the nails through the portals, because the portals are what allow us to use this energy. So what they wanted me to do was put everybody that was going to come and visit Evan in the hospital, they wanted to put energy into his body. At this point, I was like, how do I get these people? Where am I getting these people? And another download. Get your little phone book. Call everybody you know and ask them to come to the hospital. Now, I called everybody I knew in that phone book, even people I'd only dated once. I'm sure everybody thought I was crazy. Can you come to the hospital and help me? What do you want me to do? I couldn't even tell them an energy transfer because I didn't have a clue what I wanted them to do. So I was like, okay, you don't want to be too weird about this. So just get people, so I would take their hands and I'd say, just put your hands on them like this. And I said, now while you're holding his little body like that, just think about what you love most about being a human being. What is your favorite thing? Oh, I love to eat ice cream. Well, then talk about it. Talk about eating ice cream to Evan. Tell him about eating ice cream and how wonderful it is. Well, all my friends, because I told you, sexual promiscuity or sexual, uptightness. Well, I was promiscuous. So people I'd had tons and tons of sex with were coming to put their hands on my kid. And this is where it got interesting because they would talk about sex to the 4-year-old. Don't leave yet, because you got to have some sex. You got to have a blowjob. I mean, the things that these people said to the 4-year-old was making me go, ah! Fast forward for a few minutes just for the story. Evan gets home from the whole ordeal and he says, when do I get this blowjob thing? So he heard everything. He heard everything that people came in and talked about. Trains and puppies and ice cream and cookies and cakes. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. Where did I know hundreds of people? But they knew people who knew people who knew people. And there were people praying for us in China because my friend's mother was in China. And there was people praying for us in Australia because somebody knew somebody there. And we had people, and I didn't even know it till the end, but we had a prayer circle, love circle, energy circle, global at the time. And I didn't even know it. So people were coming in and they were putting their hands on Evan and they were saying what they loved about being human. Now the beings had made it very clear. 20 minutes at a time was what we needed because the giver would become depleted. So sit for 20 minutes and then talk to the child about what you love about being human and then get out and get somebody else in. So we actually had a clock. Now you think about this. ICU, Major Canadian Hospital, this is unheard of. And to this day, they won't speak about it. They won't give a statement. They won't talk to people. It's like, we never want that to happen again. But in my teaching, that's something I want to teach the world too. You know your children. You know your spouse. You know your loved one. You know your friend. You know you can help them. We have to take back that power and stop allowing medicine to be the only thing that we use because there's two bodies. And those of us that know that can work with that energy to assist somebody who's sick. So hundreds and hundreds of people, 24 hours a day. We got people going into his room and they're putting their hands on him and they're giving their high frequency energy and what they love about being a human. And he gets worse and he gets worse and he gets worse until the beginning of the third day. And when I went into his room, he smelled like rotten meat. And I said, what's that smell? And the doctor said, your son is rotting. Like at this point, there was no empathy left. They thought I was crazy. Your son is rotting. His body's rotting. His bowels have detached and have passed out of his body. So he doesn't have many hours left to live. Please unplug him. Now, I've been out in the hallway a dozen times, and I kept saying strange things like, why have you forsaken me? Weird. Why have you forsaken me? Nothing that normally I would say. So every time somebody went in the room with Evan, the bucket would show up in front of me, and it would be floating there, and I would see a styrofoam cup filled. It was so full. If you tap it, it was going to flow over. And magenta, green, purple, yellow. And the styrofoam cup would come into the field of vision, and it would pour into the big bucket. And then from here, another one would come in and pour into the big bucket. And I'd be able to look in the bucket, and all the colors were swirling around, but they didn't mix. Like they didn't model together. They were crisp. The blues, the purples, the greens, and they were just swirling. Talk about supernatural moment. And I was looking in the bucket, and then somebody else would go in and come out, and there'd be more hands filling up this bucket with fill it up, fill it up, fill it up. And I remember the last bucket, the last hand that came into the bucket was magenta. It was the most amazing color, and it tipped itself over, and as it flowed into the bucket now had an obelisk. But it was rainbow. It was just swirling. It was magnificent. It was sparkly. And it looked like if you tapped it, it would go over. And all of a sudden, I hear Shelley Cummings awake. And to this day, I don't know who called out to me. My mother said it was her, but I don't know who it was. Anyway, I go into the room, the blue room with all the tubes and everything's running blood. And he's sitting up in the bed. Oh my God, this is like the most amazing, beautiful thing. He's sitting up in the bed. Every tube is running clear. The monitor that was flatlined, is going wing, 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 wing. His brain activity is full on perfect. The burns that were on his chest from the paddles that had paddled his body, gone. And he's trying to get the ventilator out of his mouth. And I said, take that out of his mouth. And they said, well, he can't breathe. I said, yes, he can. And he's looking at me, and they said, he doesn't know who you are. He's brain dead. Now, I mean, these were cruel words. Your son is brain dead. He doesn't know who you are. And I got right in his face and I said, hey, baby, is my name Sheila? And he's looking at me like, you don't know your own name? What's wrong with you? And I said, is my name Joanne? And he's like, again, like, you don't know your, I said, is my name Shelley? And he goes, like that. I said, okay, we're done talking. So don't tell me what he is anymore. He's fine. Get that thing out of his mouth. So anyway, sure enough, they go about fussing about to get it out because he's breathing on his own. So they pull the tube out, and he's like, oh, thank God, that thing's gone. And we spent the next 24 hours, I kept putting him in my lap. I wanted him out of that bed. I didn't, and they kept telling me, look, okay, so his bowels passed out of his body. He'll never poop again. He'll never walk again. I said, will you stop telling me what this kid's never going to do? He's breathing. Can I just not have that? He's fine. So within the 24 hours, they actually came and said to me, there's nothing wrong with him. We have to send him to recovery. And I said, okay. And they said, well, you're going to be 6 months in recovery. And I'm like, okay, just get me into the damn recovery. And so they put me in recovery, and they said, okay, he'll never poop. I said, yeah, you already said all that. So that afternoon, Evan goes, Mommy, I have to poop. And I walked him to the bathroom. He used the bathroom toilet. I brought him back. He gets in the bed. He's playing with his toys. And the neurologist shows up, and I said, oh, by the way, he'll never poop and walk and all that stuff. And he goes, yeah. I said, well, I left you the floater. So we're not going to discuss that anymore. We're done talking about it. So from now on, no matter what you say, it has to be what he can do, And interesting enough, when he was in the coma, that was the other thing too, that you were not allowed to go into his room and cry. You had to act as if he was well. Everything. We can manifest everything. We can create everything. But you have to be diligently applying yourself to it. No negative talk. Don't act like he's sick. Act like he's well. Act like when we went in the room to speak to him. Hey, Ev, how you doing, buddy? What's going on? Of course, in all the sex talk, poor kid's going to have some sort of psychosis. But anyway, so he's awake. He's alive. They send us to recovery, and that's pretty much where that part of the story stops, because there's so many little stories that go with that, but it would take me forever, and I guess that needs to go in a book. But I remember this one particular scene where I was such a mess because I couldn't believe what I was doing. It was not in my nature. I would just have pulled the plug. I had no faith in anything. So to me, if he's going to be a vegetable, and if that thing is going to go wrong, and if he's not going to have any life quality, then just unplug him. That's my nature. So why did I go against my nature? Because this voice, this experience with these beings is so life-altering. I couldn't say no. Even though my brain logically was saying this is crazy, I just knew something else was happening. And I remember walking into this big room, and I was such a mess. My head was all over the place, and there was a dinky car table. And this was Evan's favorite thing, was to drive dinkies in the sand and stuff. And I threw myself on the bloody table, howling like a wounded animal, screaming over this dinky table. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm so convinced that this is going to happen. This was like, yeah, I got it. Oh, shit. No, that's not going to work. And it's funny because for 20 years, I have had the exact same experience. I got it, I got to figure it out. Okay, I'm going to tell the people. And then it pulls back and it's like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. This can't be real. This can't be happening. And it doesn't matter how many proof nuggets I have. The beings have said over and over again, those that require proof will never have enough. Hello? Because I certainly have had a ton of proof, and I still struggle with it. Okay, so we were talking about coming home from the hospital with my brain-injured child who was eating a cookie, and it would take 30 seconds to go, who owns this cookie?
So that really frightened me, but I had a deep sense of faith that it was going to be okay. So we had Christmas and we had life, and I didn't go back to university because I just couldn't wrap my head around what had happened. I still didn't have a car. So that's why I was saying, people are like, "Oh, you're so lucky." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm just really thrilled here. I don't have a car now." Anyway, I got to the point that my dad called me and said, "I have a car for you. I'm going to drive it down." So he came down from Ontario. He brought me the little car. It was great. It did the job. It was one of those woody vans. Do you remember those station wagons with the wood down the side? That's how old this thing was. But, again, I was feeling pretty cocky, pretty invincible that this car, I could do anything with it. So I decided to drive to Ontario in my old woody car. And Dad used to say, "Oh, that's a miracle." And I'd say, "Well, I'm full of miracles, Dad." So off I go to Ontario. Now, before I go to Ontario, this is a cool little story to share, because spirit, God, source, energy, beings are constantly working with us. And don't get caught up in language. If to one of us it's beings, to one of us it's angels. It's the same energy. It is the same energy, and they will take the form that will bring you comfort. If you're an angel-based individual, then you're going to get angel-based activity. It's the same energy as extraterrestrial energy, but it shows up for you differently. I think this is part of what happens for people. They get into this segregation again, right? Oh, I believe in this, and you believe in this. So what the being said, unite in our similarities, or we will disintegrate in our differences. So whatever being comes to you is of highest light. I call it divine light. And it's inhabiting a being that can speak to you. So anyway, I go into the library because my little old woody car has no radio. And I'm going to get the kids those earphone things and little recorders so they can listen to stories. And I walk down because I'm going to get one for me. And this book falls off the shelf. And I looked down at the book and it said Talking to Heaven by James Van Praagh. I said, "No way, that ain't happening." And I picked it up and I shoved it back in the wall. And I was like, "I'm not doing this shit. We're not going there with weird stuff." So I went looking for Anne Rice. Let's talk about vampires or something, because I'm much more comfortable in that world than this spiritual world. So I come back down, I pick up a few books, and as I come back up the thing again, that damn book is on the floor. Talking to Heaven with James Van Praagh. I said, "Okay, fine, I'm going to put it in the car, but I'm not listening to it." So I took the book with me, I threw it on the seat, I got in my car, and I headed to Ontario in a car that you shouldn't head across the city in. But I went to Ontario. So I come out of Cabano, which is in Quebec, and I get in the car. It's early morning, it's 7 o'clock, the kids are still really sleepy, so they get in the back, snuggle down to go to sleep. I'm coming up over the mountain, and as I come up over the crest of this mountain, oh no, I'm going to cry. Always. I hear, "Hello, dear one." And I almost went right off the road because it's the same voice that tried to command me to relax. If you continue to fight the water, you're going to drown. "Oh my God, you're the voice from the car." And he goes, "Yes, we are here to communicate." And I'm like, "We?" Because there is out there is a collective of energy. They're not individuals like we are. He didn't say I. He said we. We've come to teach you. We've come to talk to you. We've come to share information with you. And I'm like, I've done that for 20 years. I call it my crazy lips. Like, oh my God. But the energy in the car is so unbelievable. I'm like blissing out. I'm driving like this. And this being, he said his name was Aramis. And he's telling me that they're going to come and teach me, and they're going to tell me what happened with Evan and how it happened and what we are. And I'm blissing out. And I'm like, okay. And I drove right out in the other lane. And this transport truck is coming down the road. And I'm like, holy shit. And I pull back in my lane. And this voice says, "Well, it's obviously not a good time to be talking to you. So we're going to leave and we'll come back again. We will come again. We will come to teach you. And as this energy pulls away from my body, now I'm driving my old Woody car, and it's a normal day, normal morning, but the energy in the car, you can feel it. It's not like air at all. It's like plasma. And my heart chakra, which I didn't even know I had a heart chakra, that was so funny, a heart chakra. But now I know it was like this big. This pure love is in my field. And I'm blissing out. Kids are asleep. I almost killed everybody. But I'll tell you what, I didn't care about my kids. I didn't care about anything. All I wanted to do was go home with that being. Take me with you. Don't leave me here. And I started to cry, and I was like, don't leave, don't leave, don't leave, don't leave. But it's leaving. You don't have any say in the matter. And as it leaves, it reminds me of if you took two really wet Play-Doh blobs and you boinked them together like this, and then you went, right? They would come across and they would pop open. Well, that's what had happened. It was like the energy field that as this group of beings moved away out of my field, this was happening, and it was sucking like, and then it popped, and the being was gone. I had to stop the car. I had to cry and cry and cry, and the kids were like, what's wrong? I don't know what's wrong. Go back to sleep, put your book in, do something. James Van Praagh, Talking to Heaven, is sitting on the chair right there. Okay, I'll listen to it. So I never turned it off. And it was a book about channeling energy. Well, I didn't know what energy was. I didn't know what channeling was. All I knew was that what had ever just happened to me, I wasn't in a hospital. I wasn't under duress. I wasn't in stress. I wasn't making it up. Something just came in my car and talked to me. So I listened to James Van Praagh's story, and I listened all the way to the house, and I'm like, could this be real? Could this be real? Could this be real? Oh my God, it must be real. So I go into my dad's house, and my father immediately says that my Uncle Bud has sent me books. Now, my Uncle Bud went blind, so he couldn't read books anymore. And he had sent me 3 books, Edgar Cayce. Now, this is weird stuff. This was from Newfoundland. Who in Newfoundland knew about Edgar Cayce? It wasn't something that I knew about, but now I know about Edgar Cayce. This was in July of 2003. So the accident happened November 14th, 2002. My dad came with the car in March, and then I took the old Woody up. It was July-ish. So Uncle Bud had sent Edgar Cayce books. And the night before I get to my dad's place, I have had this vision. I'm trying to see where the vision fits in, time frame. Didn't have the Edgar Cayce books yet. So I had seen a natural disaster. I saw from New York to just above Virginia Beach this massive tsunami that was caused by an earthquake in the Atlantic Ocean. And so what I had seen was the ground was coming back. When you pull a cold knife through cold butter and it cracks and the butter cracks back? Well, that's what it looked like, that underneath the water there was this massive earthquake, and the land underneath the water was coming up and cracking back, and it caused this massive tsunami that came in and hit the coast, and it lit up the eastern seaboard of the coast down just before Virginia Beach. And I got really upset, and I said, if you want me to do something for you, don't show me this shit. I can't handle seeing catastrophes. I'm a wimp. If there's going to be pain and suffering, I'm not the one to tell or show. I can help you with something else. So I get there. My dad gives me the Edgar Cayce books. I go upstairs. I crack one open, and I start reading just a section. And sure enough, Edgar Cayce is talking about how so many people have said about the Pacific coast falling into the ocean. And he said, the eastern seaboard is going to fall from New York to Virginia. Well, I threw the book. It's like, okay, I don't want to know this stuff. I don't want to see this stuff. I don't want anything to do with this stuff. And so what had started with the first book, Talking to Heaven, was now closing as fast as it opened. And that's what I mean about us as spiritual creatures. We get a piece of information, we learn, we grow, and then we have a holy shit moment and we pull ourselves completely out. And we say, I'm not doing this anymore, or this frightens me, or whatever might be happening. So that's what's happened. I've had a full-on spiritual experience, and this has now frightened me, and I've pulled back again. So these beings want to communicate with me, but I don't want to communicate with them. So I shut it all down again. And I don't have any more experiences while I'm there going through my visit with my father and, trying to put my life back together. I don't get any more real experiences for some time. So they're pretty good with working with us. If you say stop, back up, give me some space, we can get it. But you have to be in charge. Yes, come on, let's do it. No, bug off and go away. So anyway, the year continues and falls out, and I meet a guy and we start dating and that kind of thing. And then the beings come back and they say, we really want to teach you. We really need to teach you. There's something coming we need you to do. And we want you to be present. We want you to be listening. And the first thing they told me was that medicine that you're on is an insulator. So I was on the highest doses of Prozac going. I was not a happy camper, and this didn't make me any happier. So I was on these huge doses of Prozac. And the beings explained to me that most humans were taking insulators. And insulators were medications that cut off communication between source energy and the human vessel. Now, I don't want anybody rushing out to get off their medicine when I say these stories, but there are ways to deal with the things that are happening to us that we don't take insulators. But don't rush out and stop taking medicine, because I did. Because what I did was, the guy I was dating said, I will take care of the kids, get off the medicine. And so for 6 solid weeks, I went through hell. And it was hell getting off that medicine. And I never took it again. So I don't take any medicine at all. But at that point, it was day and night. Complete insulation, I heard nothing. Got off the medicine, boom. I opened the world up. So the very first thing I started to encounter was what I call dead people energy. I started seeing ghosts. I started seeing people that weren't there. I started hearing ghost energy. So I remember this one night, I'm asleep in the bed and I feel this, Shelley, wake up. And I open my eyes and there's a man sitting in the corner, and he's got his hands crossed across his belly, and he's got a big hat on, kind of like Abraham Lincoln, and a high collar. And he's sitting there looking at me, and I started to scream, "Wah!" So I crawled right up the boyfriend's ass, and I rolled around and looked at the other side of the room. Well, the next thing I know, I wake up again, the same kind of wake up, and now the guy with the big hat is standing, and I can see him in the mirror. Wah! And I'm screaming again, and the boyfriend wakes up and he goes, listen, the next time he shows up, ask him what he wants. Which was the most logical thing in the world. But when it's a ghost, it didn't feel very logical. So I had several encounters with ghosts that I didn't like, and I said, look, if you guys want to talk to me, I'm okay with that, but I don't want to talk to dead people. I don't want to talk to dead things. How do I stop this? So this was the first time I had to figure out how to do something. So they told me to put a little tattoo on the base of my neck. They said, in the doing, you create the reality. Why would you do something if you didn't believe it to be true? And if you believe it to be true, then you create the reality around you. So I put the tattoo on and I stopped all the communication with the dead people. But I didn't want to stop the communication with the otherworldlies, the multidimensionals. Whatever that was happening, that I liked it. It felt good. When they showed up, the energy felt good. So now I'm in the early stages of trying to figure out, well, is that dead energy? Is that real energy? What is energy? What are we? Why is this happening? So I discovered that we are all multidimensional beings in physical suits. So So this was the first thing they started to teach me was what we are. Now, for some reason, whether we did it on purpose or whether it's happened to us, we have shut the button off. So what they described was, they said, if you see deer running, they run like this and they never touch each other. Fish, they never touch each other. Birds, you know, they're flying through the air. They never touch each other. So they explained to me that there was this invisible energetic grid that lived around the planet. And it wasn't just around, it ran through the planet. And they explained to me that the reason honeybees make honeycomb, you know how the hexagons all grow out, is because they build what they can see. Now we can't see it, but the animals can feel it and sense it. The honeybees can see it. They build the grid when they build their honeycombs. That's what they're doing. So now I understand, oh my God, these suits are not forever. These suits, so Shelley will die, but the energy that drives Shelley will continue and get a new suit. But Shelley will never be lost. It will become part of that experience for that being. And it's eternally part of this grid. So they started talking to me about this earth grid that was all around us. And it said that everything we believe to be true is encompassed in this. So you know how they put the Hubble telescope and they said there's nothing in there? And they put it into a black hole and there's nothing in there, but a month later, by the time the light reaches us, there's 10 billion stars that we said there's nothing there. That is us, right? That is our capacity, that we're part of this universal completeness. But right now, we are encased in a grid. And to me, it almost feels like a large plasma bubble, like we're injected into this game board. And I'm more convinced than ever that we have agreed to be here to play this game. But something has gone off. Something that we were entitled to have as tools for our journey here have been distorted, and that we can get them back. So they started to talk to me about this grid and about being an energy being in a suit. Now they started doing strange things with me. Like I started breathing through my third chakra. Again, I didn't know what a chakra was. I didn't know what colors they were, but this was yellow. And it looked like a sea anemone. And when I would do the breathing exercises, I could see it going. And I was like, oh my God. So this little yellow sea anemone thing was able to, and this was our emotional center, and that they were healing some of this emotional stuff I had been through. And then they would push energy up through my body, and they'd say, do you feel this? And there was a chakra here. They're like cups, and they stick off of your body about this big, and they've got a spiral that happens, and energy moves in and out of those chakras. So they're showing me these things. They're teaching me, I guess, the basis of the core of what we are. Like these chakra systems, one puts us down into the earth, one pushes us out into the heavens. We are anchored all the time by this energy. Now, if you work with this energy, and if you open it up, and if you close it up, and you practice these different things, you become more and more connected to this truth. In the doing, you create the reality. So Fire the Grid is all about saying yes. So now I was saying yes. I was saying, so the ghosty creatures were gone, and I wasn't dealing with that anymore. Now I was dealing with this high frequency love light. And again, they will show up for you the way you need them to show up. So Evan's experiences have always been angels. You know, and I'm like, lucky kid, he gets the angels. I get the ETs. So anyway, at this point, I just don't know what's happening, except I'm going with it. And my mother is really supporting me, looking for a group of people that could help me with all these strange things. So I start with a pen, and the first symbol comes as this snake eating its own tail. And they say, put it on your arm. And I'm like, I'm not putting a damn tattoo on my arm. Are you crazy? Like, I don't want a tattoo. Well, now I have many tattoos because the one thing I've discovered is the more I say no, the more I always end up saying yes. So they present it and present it and present it, and you're fighting it and you're fighting it and fighting it. So, you know what? Just stop fighting. Just say yes in the beginning. So once they got me to understand that we were living in this earth grid and that we had our own grid around our bodies, we had an energy field that, is about 3 feet, like an egg, and that we had this chakra system, and energy moved into the spinal system and ran through the physical being this way. Now, these are in tons of books. People talk about this type of stuff all the time. But what was it they wanted me to do?